Welcome again to another episode of the Tech Marketing Podcast. I'm joined in the podcasting studio by a fellow podcast veteran. You've, of course, been on the Tech Marketing Podcast with us before.
A while ago now.
It was, yeah. Adam Brown, Head of Channel Sales at Samsung. So welcome again, Adam.
Nice to have you back.
It's a pleasure to have you back. I think we've been excited to do this for a while. You've been incredibly active on LinkedIn. And one of the main things you've been active about, of course, is the use of AI and artificial intelligence. We're going to discuss kind of some of that today and then how that bleeds into human connections, aren't we?
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
As you got involved in that community, like how have you found the meteoric rise of artificial intelligence? Like tell me about your journey with it so far.
But I don't want to sound super cynical or be one of those people, but AI's been around for a lot longer than LinkedIn would have you believe. I think what's really interesting is just how much attention it's got recently rather than necessarily it changing. It's really interesting when you think about how embedded AI has been in so many of our lives for such a long time. Like if you use Amazon, most of us do. The quality of the recommendations of those products it's been a bit spooky at times. That's AI.
We all use the Target. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but the Target example where they predicted as a teenager was pregnant before their family knew. So you're right, product recommendations always been there.
I mean, it's the cornerstone of, good online marketing nowadays, right? Isn't it? Sending up properly targeted adverts / recommendations. I mean, that's AI. But it's hidden and it's not as, fun or flashy as some of the examples, I guess, that have caught fire more recently. And it's been really fascinating to be, to watch it as an observer. Like as a tech enthusiast and someone who loves that sort of stuff, it's been great. And of course, I'm in a business as well that has been using it to sell product and has embedded a lot of those things in its products as well. So yeah, it's been super interesting. One
thing that I found really very interesting as we've looked at the rise of AI is how much you mentioned it in marketing. Like someone's done a study of their inbox and their inbox was like this for a long time where it was going along on almost a flat line. And then as soon as ChatGPT launched, it was like this. Have you found being in sales that there's been a not just the meteoric rise of AI's usage, but its usage in your industry?
The fancy way to describe it would be the signal to noise ratio.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of noise about it. I think the actual real usage of it in B2B, particularly in the commercial space where I am, not so much yet. I think a lot of businesses are really nervous about data integrity and about security and about how best to use it. I think consumers, I think there's a different thing. If you look at the numbers of people using ChatGPT or Gemini or Circle to search the stuff on our phones, the numbers are incredible. Actually, the adoption rate in the consumer space is incredible. And it's gone way faster than any of the other technologies before it. I think businesses are naturally risk averse, right? So it's been much, much harder to persuade businesses. But that hasn't stopped the likes of, Microsoft and Samsung and, Qualcomm talking a big game about, Copilot and all that kind of stuff. It is coming.
Yeah.
Now, and there's no doubt that it's going to cause, lots of potential productivity increases. It's going to certainly, for those of us in sales, it's going to involve a lot of new devices and new services, which is always helpful. But there's no doubt, it's going to change. It's going to change people's lives.
You mentioned productivity increase, actually. I saw a stat on this week, which is kind of a bit controversial. It's something that I've been looking into for a while as well. But if you look at the market crash of the 1930s, you look at the market crash of 2008, and when you look at what we're going through today, we're actually at the lowest level of productivity gain in history, even throughout those events. So it does make you wonder, like, despite all of the excitement around AI, about the fact that we can now write emails 5 times longer in half the time.
Yeah.
Like I don't think we quite reached the pinnacle of what we can achieve with it yet. I think we're still in that experimentation phase.
It's incredibly early. We're definitely right at the cutting edge. I don't know. I'm an eternal optimist. I do believe, and I've always believed this, the technology is like a force for good.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to be caught up in a lot of the negative stuff that's happening. And for sure, there are, cost, environmental, societal impacts of any technology. AI is included in that. But no, we haven't got a clue yet how AI is going to change the way we do business and the way we work. Just as we didn't know we knew that the internet was coming and that online shopping would be a thing.
Yeah.
And it took a big burst of the bubble before that really established itself. But I mean, we've sleptwalked really into a world where everything is bought online all the time now.
Yeah.
And it's totally normal. And it was only a couple of decades ago where it was not totally normal.
But you're right. Like if I think about where we are, where we're heading with AI, and you compare that to the rise of, say, radio, television, online shopping, we're definitely starting to reach that inflection point. But what do you think's missing? What do you think is the bit that needs to happen next, especially when we look at B2B sales?
Any new tool that comes out, I think, those of us whose job it is to make money out of selling the tools are usually ahead of the demand, right? We've got this shiny new thing and you've got to try and create a case study. You've got to try and create a use case for a business. I think we've all got a responsibility, actually, particularly in my side of business, to help others understand why you could use it. And I think it's really tricky. You need to persuade people that the risk is worth taking on a proof of concept or on a trial or on a, rolling it out and seeing what happens. And they've got to do that ahead of the knowledge of what it will actually deliver. There's the promise, but not yet the knowledge. So it's really tricky. And every time you go to any sort of channel meetup or you're in a room with lots of other channel people, there's a collective responsibility there to help business, to understand the point of the IT tools that we are all espousing as being the next big thing. So, you ask me what's missing. Well, it's the actual proof can be more productive and it will help us as individuals and businesses. I don't think there's any doubt it will. It's just how do we actually prove it? And in an age where everything is measurable and ROI is, you have to prove the ROI on anything nowadays before you can spend any money.
Yeah,
it's really tough to do that ahead of an adoption curve. Really hard.
I actually thought you were going to go in a different direction there, but I'm going to steer us towards, because as you try and bring, channel is one of the slowest moving elements, I think, of any B2B organization. They're always, I'm going to be fairly controversial here. People I see
protective of the channel that I work.
I've spent 15 years operating the channel, and so many of the conversations that I've had with channel leaders over the last decade, they're almost coming back to the same points. Like, how do we enable channel partners better? How do we get them using our tools? How do we get them marketing or sales? How do we get them to register deals better? And those conversations really haven't changed. The couple of things that I'm kind of come back to, I think you're right with proof. I think we've reached that inflection point where we need to understand, what are the best ways to deploy this new technology. You wouldn't go back in time and start sending people memos now. You're still going to send people, you're going to use an email, you're going to use WhatsApp. The cat's out the bag with AI, but I think we need to figure out what the right use cases are, and that's where much of the challenges lie. But I also think, I was more thinking it's about people. Like, as a technologist, I've come into these worlds thinking technology can solve this problem. And actually, I've found that ultimately it's got to be a combination of enabling the right people to get there. And technology is only a third of the actual issue. The rest of it has got to be...
It's just a tool.
Yeah.
And I think in exactly the same way that we were all forced into video conferencing and working remotely, right? We were forced into that change. It happened a lot quicker than it would have otherwise. And I think the debate post all of that has been fascinating, right? To watch people taking sides about which is best or better. Should I be in the office or should I be remote? Well, it's a wrong question to be asking. It's just a tool. Remote working is just a tool, right? Set up your business in a way that allows your people to be the best of what they do. Don't try and replace them with a tool, and don't imagine the tool is going to solve the problem for you. And it's exactly the same for AI. Like, you can't just imagine the Copilot is going to suddenly make you better at, being productive in your...
Yeah.
But if you rubbish a PowerPoint now and you can't, be good at storytelling and stand up and present well, then no amount of neatly summarized notes or, creative starter point for you is going to help you on that. That's a core skill you're missing. The tool isn't going to solve that for you.
I think that's exactly how we should be thinking about stuff. Like, storytelling is actually one of the main things I see missing in B2B, and AI is not going to make you better at doing that. As I think about that example, would you say authenticity is going to be one of those challenges as well? Like, how do how do you make sure people we're still being authentic with each other when so much of this could be written or expanded on by AI?
I mean, once you tune your eye into it, the AI generated content on LinkedIn, for example, is incredibly easy to spot. I can't tell you as well how many emails I've had from people, because I'm currently recruiting. Like, so many people have messaged me with can I talk to you about the job? But it's obvious that they've gotten ChatGPT to write it. It's overly formal, and it's got all the sort of hallmarks in. And it's really depressing. I don't know who you are if you're going to talk to me with the computer sat in the middle. So, yeah, I think authenticity is going to be really important.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, I think being in real life like this, you can't, this is going to be the one last part.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fake it. You can't introduce an AI agent effectively into this conversation, right? And I think texting this fiercely, holding on to this will be really important.
And that's why when I think about the channel and I say people are the third element, like there's a great example that we had last year on the Tech Marketing podcast where it was a Cisco person and a partner and a charity got together to go and solve a big problem. And it only happened because they happened to be out for dinner together. That's not something that can be enabled through, remote working. It might have happened, but it's not something that would have happened if you would have just all put your stuff into a big chat bot and got an answer.
Yeah.
Like it only comes out through the savoring the surprises, I would say, through meeting people in person.
Yeah.
So could I completely agree, but like how do you blend those two worlds together to get the biggest outcome?
I mean, if I could give you a really good answer on this, I think I'd be rich. I think it's a funny, like the channel and IT and a lot of this space, it was very relationship based. I think it's been massively professionalized over the last kind of 10, 20 years.
Yep.
Much the same as the marketing side of things, right?
Yep.
We use money and we use data and we use evidence to track how that money flows through either a customer journey or a campaign, right? And we've almost forgotten about the relationship part.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of businesses now that I don't think have put enough effort and time into that. And I wonder if, ironically, we're coming back in a way to some of those old school, relationship skills.
Yep.
That are going to be ever more important.
It's what I'm hearing a lot on the channel side, but the other element I think is worth recognizing where, and I'm just going to riff on this for a little bit, but I think it's where AI does have a place to play. There's this quote by Paul Bay from Ingram Micro in the US, and he came out last year that a customer outcome needs on average 7 different partners or products or solutions to deliver, right? It's a fairly obvious quote when you think about it, right? You can't, if you're enabling, even buying a laptop might be a laptop provider, a security provider, you've probably got Microsoft somewhere in that mix. That's 3 just off the bat before we think about everything else. And one concept that we've been talking about is this idea that in each of those different outcomes, you could be playing a different role, or your solution could be playing a different role, and how you're brought in and how that's coordinated is going to be one of the big challenges. And that lends itself a little bit to data and technology, but it is the blend of how you bring those different partners together.
Yeah.
We call them, this is a bit of a cheesy term, we call them like the burger or the fries. Like, are you like the main meal, that like the laptop in this case, or are you one of the add-ons that then adds value to it? And how do you coordinate that ecosystem?
I mean, the chef is the important bit, right? Because without all that, it's just ingredients.
Actually, that is a great analogy that I hadn't thought about.
Well, that's worked well. That.
Yeah, that has. Yeah. I'm gonna use that now. Like, but you're right. Like, that's where AI can play. Could they play as the chef to help bring people together in the right order?
I was going to say the opposite, actually, that the chef will be the last human role remaining. But actually, in some respects, an AI, and there's a really good example that was popped up, the Bordy one we were talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, just for our listeners, what is Bordy?
Bordy's this really interesting thing. I mean, again, if you've been on LinkedIn, it's been everywhere. It's an AI voice agent that you call up and you have a conversation with it. He's got a very disarming Australian accent, which is immediately somehow comforting.
I wonder how they picked that, by the way.
I think they wanted something that wasn't American but wasn't British. They needed somewhere that sort of spoke English, but was sort of, but that's a universal emotion. Anyway, he's very disarming and he's very nice. But you have a very natural language kind of conversation with him.
Mm-hmm.
The point of Bordy, anyway, is to connect you to other human beings. So for me, I was super excited about that because I think every other AI tool I've ever seen is like, here's how we can replace part of you, and here's how we can do what you used to do or someone else would do, but we can do it with a computer. This is the exact opposite. Bawdy doesn't exist without the human beings. Bawdy is designed to connect human beings together. So you can kind of give him a summary of what you're looking for. And yeah, he'll introduce you to other humans. And of course, as the scale grows and the network grows, his ability to connect you to other people that you would have never met otherwise increases exponentially. So yeah, I think it's fascinating use of AI. And for me, it's a sign that like, it doesn't just have to be a replacement for what we can do. It can be additive. It can be add something to us as humans.
I did it straight after we talked for the prep call for this actually, and apart from the Australian accent, which I hadn't considered as being disarming, but now I might try and retrain myself to have an Australian accent just based on that comment. But it was the element of how he introduced a conversation with you to understand where your passions lie. Like it's kind of similar to this, to what we're doing now, but to be able to, the outcome that he had was very different to how I would describe myself if I just would have written
really positive, right?
Yeah,
exactly. At the end of the call, you're like, wow, that made me feel good about myself. Like Bawdy was really complimentary about my skills and my background in a way that I would have never particularly sort of.
How many calls have you done? Do you do more daily Bawdy calls now?
We won't talk about that. There's something else in a minute actually, but it's very similar. There's a tool in Gemini called Notebook LM.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you used that?
Yes.
Have you put your CV into it?
No.
It's fascinating. Put your CV into it, and I don't want to scare you, but it does a podcast with two people, and they have an incredibly natural conversation about you, and it's at once both very disturbing, but also really like reaffirming. Like some of the things, it's a 20-minute podcast, and I sat there and listened to the whole thing, and it didn't feel egocentric to do it. Honestly, it felt like therapy in a way. They came off the end of the corner thinking, wow, that was me. And I felt really good about myself. And I was like, yeah, I am successful and wonderful. And yeah, it was a really positive experience.
I actually might do that straight after this because that's a great way of...
Good Friday pick me up.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I mean, the technology behind it is amazing. And it's amazing how quickly I've already got past, like, it's taken my CV, it's read it, it's generated two people having a conversation about me in an in-depth analysis. I mean, that's incredible on its own. And yeah, what I'm talking about is actually the impact having me as a person, not the technology.
I actually think Notebook LLM, that core tech could have a very interesting case in sales. And I'm sure you've probably had the same thinking, which is, could I take a deck, which is our products and then the client's personas, and then on the way to the sales pitch, I can consume that in a very efficient way that allows you to ingest. Like, it's not like just the fact that it's a conversation between two people and they add little flourishes of language that make it much more engaging to listen to.
Yeah. There's that, but I'd be much more interested in using it as a coach.
Yes. Yeah.
So, like, yes, learning, but again, that's quite passive. I actually think you can do as good a job with that summary tools elsewhere. But if I was to use that as a conversational coach, it understands the subjects faster and better than I could have ever done. It doesn't just learn passive learning. And it will actively coach me on what I'm missing. That's what I don't think we're quite there yet.
There are some tools out there for Beat. So, and then I know I'm going off a little bit off topic here, but we've been exploring the call center market now is exploded with these tools. And they're really fascinating the way that you can take things like a BANT requirement, which we've lived and breathed in B2B for years, and fill in their requirements and their needs real time as you're having a conversation.
Yeah.
And do things like suggest products or suggest accessories or help articles throughout the call. But that we have now started to see providers that can offer that coaching service where they take a call recording and then offer back coaching advice. So that, I think you're right, that's still allowing for the human connection. Like I wouldn't want a Bawdy, we were talking about this just at the beginning, I wouldn't Bawdy to go out and do my sales calls. No. Because I think that's going to frustrate your end customer anymore.
Do I think there's a role for AI agents doing maybe first round cold calling? Potentially. Maybe follow-up calls, maybe there's a role for it somewhere, but I mean, we've all had terrible experiences with call centers, right? And we've all been sat on the end wanting to scream into the void because the irritating, computer won't give me what I need. So I can imagine that would get grating quite quickly. You have to make sure it was...
I mean, it's been... If I look at the history of chatbots in B2B for a second, right? And back in 2015, 2016, when we started to see the explosion of companies like Drift, the general feedback was most buyers didn't want to use them. And nowadays, I would prefer to use a chatbot over something else because I know I can get the answer. So I think we're probably at that nexus point where we're going to see potentially people get frustrated with it until they get a good experience, and then they'll be happy to use them.
I think there's an age divide thing here as well. Like, it's already the case that, let's just say younger folks, because Gen Z has a whole thing attached to it, but like the younger, they don't want to make phone calls, right? Some of them fear phone calls, and they'd much rather use messaging to communicate. And actually, I can totally imagine a world in which talking to a bot and knowing it's a bot, but still having a great conversation with it
And resolving your issue.
is preferable.
Yep.
To having to talk to a scary actual human being. Like, we shouldn't apply our, old analog lenses to the digital natives that perhaps be more comfortable with that sort of tech.
I think the stat is 81% don't want to speak to sales. So putting it the other way, only 90% of your audience want to.
Yeah.
Like what? And the age divide, where 74% millennials and younger as B2B buyers. I'm quoting at the top of my head. It's probably wrong. It must be bigger.
Do you know why? Like, my sense of that is that most pitches you get are, broad, generic, massively just, spray gunned into your inbox. Like, I get them myself. I get tons and tons of, hi, Adam. Like, and it's such an obvious, mail merge.
I do enjoy when they get it wrong though. When it's like, hi, insert first name here, and you're like, yeah. I'm some cases I open those more often than others just to see how bad they.
Here's a pro tip on LinkedIn: put an emoji into your name, and if they're using that, if the emoji comes into it, if they just use your name, it's been handwritten. If the emoji appears in the mail merge,
that you'll see me updating my LinkedIn after this now.
That's as sneaky as adding the name of the company as your middle name when you sign up for a new account. So if you ever get spam mail, it's got that.
You know they've just
actually sold your database. I can't remember where we went with that one.
Yeah, no, but that is a good pro tip. I'm gonna use that. But
sales being the scattergun approach, there's a reason why so many people don't want to take calls from sales, is because they don't make the effort to actually personalize the pitch. And actually, if you had an AI agent, perhaps that already done all the research and coached me on my approach and given me a better way to. I mean, it doesn't change the fact that you shouldn't be lazy enough to pitch generically into something that needs a specific approach.
I think one of the best examples, I think, in B2B where there's an opportunity to bring AI into this to make a better experience is things like pricing. We like having that little box that says like enterprise, call us, and that really means you've got to go and spend half an hour on the phone to a SDR qualifying that you've got the budget and need and the timeline and then you've got to go and spend another hour doing a demo before they finally give you a price.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's one of the biggest opportunities, which is most of your customers probably are outside of the price range or you're going to be too expensive. You're just going to end up disappointing them at the end of 2 hours worth of calls. What other opportunities, especially with a channel, what other opportunities can you see for AI?
I mean, I think far too often people start still with the product and the features, rather than worrying about what the outcome for the customer is.
Yeah.
And that's a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
It's always been the case that you should start with the customer outcome and work backwards.
That's not an AI thing, right? That's
But the reason why people don't do it is because it's hard work. The hard yards of that is the research that most sellers don't want to have to do. And most buyers, and I've been a buyer, right? Half of my career I was a buyer, and I've been approached by so many people who could not be bothered to do the research. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is. You want to be like, challenge yourself. For me, is like the best model.
Have you read his latest book on this?
I haven't.
So Brent Adelson? I'll look it up in a second. I'll send you his podcast straight after this because I was listening to it yesterday. His just going in like massive off tangent, but it's just so random how you just mentioned that. Like there's a quote that he said on this podcast that's really sticking with me, which is, "You're like the number one solution to their number three problem." So all you are is like, it's a great way of putting it, which is like you are a good solution, but it's not the main problem they're having. And if you're just talking speeds and feeds or product features, you're never going to translate it to like what that outcome means.
I can tell you now, the sellers that are effective are the ones that tell me something I don't know. Tell me something I don't know. I know my business better than you do. But come in here and tell me something that I couldn't have found out myself, or I didn't know myself, or bring me insight.
Yeah,
bring me a challenging insight. I love that model because I do think, for me, it really rings true. You have to bring a challenging insight and not be afraid of that difficult conversation, rather than just coming in and hoping that eventually, if you pitch enough times and you make the price low enough, they'll want to buy it.
But and that, coming back to AI for a second, I think that's where, if we rely too much on artificial intelligence, that's where we're going to fall down. Because we were just talking about this as you came in, right? We're both dressed the same.
In our unique
outfits, yeah. But we got different shoes on at least. We just become a sea of sameness. Like, it'd be the same message. If you use AI to generate a sales outreach message, it's just going to be
for sure
exactly the same as what everyone else is saying.
But creating more generic messages isn't the answer, right? And I think the problem with AI at the minute is that a lot of people are using it to create generic emails. Here's why my CV is great, and here's why I want them, but they don't. That's one message they sent to 100 people. If you use AI to instead conduct research on the role in the company and shortcut that presence, right? There's a lot of hard yards there that's really difficult to do. Most people don't want to do. AI can make that a lot quicker. So you've got to kind of try and, I think, retrain yourself and thinking it as a way to, instead of doing better what I'm already doing, you've got to do it. You've got to, use AI to add to what you've perhaps been missing or haven't been doing. And for me, research is like the one thing where AI I think works really well at the moment is research. You've got to be careful. You've got to be careful with your sources. You've got to, make sure it isn't making stuff up. But to get you started in a cycle of research where, research is hard and it's expensive and it's difficult and it's time consuming, and you can generate insight, in a taken button.
But on the flip side of that, I think AI has also got a place to play in helping to map out the solution against the products. Because I know that may sound very mechanical, but I've been in thousands of pitches over the last 15 years for Together. There's no way that you can keep every case study in your head. Right. You can map every product or every service to what the customer needs. And so just having the ability, in the same way that it helps with research to get you a broad outlook in places that you probably hadn't considered, it's the same thing as your products and services get more complex. You need to know how can you simplify that message.
One of the most disruptive places for AI is law. Mm-hmm. Because in the same way you can't remember all the case studies, you can't remember all the cases. And of course, being a big fancy lawyer was predicated on how many cases you could remember and how well you could, recall them and apply them to the current situation. Because that's what an LLM is designed. Yes.
Assuming you remove the hallucination from it, which I know it has done with law, but
it has. And I know there's been a few lawyers that have been caught out. But that ability to shortcut, the learning, and to, I think it's very easy to get lazy. I think that's the only danger, right? Like, how do you guard yourself against, I'll just let the AI do it, and being lazy? I think it's going to be more and more difficult as it gets smarter and sharper and, more accurate. But then, you could argue the same thing. Google searches have reduced us to, when was the last time you ever really, truly didn't know something and then had to go and find it out?
This is something
there's ruined pub quizzes on internet, but we can find anything out now.
This is a big rabbit hole. Do we want to go down this rabbit hole? So there's two things that are going around my head on this at the moment. You've got kids as well, haven't you?
I have.
So
yeah, 2 primary school age children. Yeah.
Yeah. How old are they?
9 and 6.
So I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, 2.5-year-old, and I'm at a stage with the 6-year-old where, like, they're getting into gaming and devices, and you kind of want to allow them to have enough, but then add enough of a reward scheme to it. So I'm trying to design something at the moment that means they have to go to an encyclopedia to go look something up.
An actual book.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because
in real life.
In real life, exactly. So I'm sat there being like, I need you to understand how to go and look stuff up and what the right questions to ask, because that's really relevant to me. Because
do you?
Yes, and okay, this is a deep rabbit hole we're going to go into. Are you ready for this? Because there's the other side of it with things like Notebook LLM, where think about how engaging that makes a learning example for a child. Like, you can, if you've seen the latest Google demos with Gemini, you can give it a whole bunch of information on physics, and then say explain the this law using basketball, and it will explain something that it normally would have been quite a dull lesson in an analogy that children can understand, which I think is fascinating.
But look, here's the hot take on the opposite side, right? Which is, I don't need knowledge anymore. I need the skills to navigate the knowledge.
Yes.
I need to be able to do critical thinking and lateral thinking. I need to be able to think, I need the same skills that you would perhaps learn during those learning experiences, but I don't need the knowledge. Why would I waste my time going to an encyclopedia when I can get the answer immediately? I'm much better off spending my time
learning critical thinking or creativity, that knowledge recall is pointless. What's the point of that?
Yeah, so it's on the encyclopedia side. It's not about. You're right. It's not about knowledge recall, but it's about knowing how.
I truly believe that.
Yeah, but I think it's a very, very good point. And I think we both went to the same university. Actually, we both went to Nottingham, if I remember correctly.
University of Nottingham.
Yeah. I went to university not to learn what I learned, although it was very fascinating. It was to learn how to learn quickly and consume it. Like that was from the 4 years I was there, that's what I came out with, was like, how can I understand something? And so I don't disagree with your point of view.
I found the regurgitation of information that always had to be cited, I found it formulaic, to be honest. There was something missing in that for me. I didn't enjoy it fully.
If you were just doing management, there was a lot of regurgitation.
There was no value in original thought.
Yeah.
And maybe that came later if you wanted to be truly academic.
You go on and do masters or a PhD or whatever. But I found, undergraduate studies to be quite limiting, in a way.
I don't know. I definitely came out of it with that ability to, and maybe I only really mastered it in the final years, the ability to consume something using my own mental models and then regurgitate. But you're right, it was a lot of regurgitation initially.
And it's funny, isn't it, to think about whether or not that skill will be of any use to your children whatsoever, in a world in which not just, you can't just Google the answer, but you can actually get a better structured, better research, better answer to any question that involves recall of knowledge. Like, at what point does that become not useful?
So let's bring it back to obviously where we're working now. I agree with you about we need to understand not the knowledge side, but the lateral thinking side. How do you, as a leader in B2B and sales, how do you bring that into your teams and into your day? What advice would you give to anyone else?
I mean, there's no doubt that those things we talked about are really important. Lateral thinking just means, not thinking of the obvious, right? Like trying to go for a more creative solution. I think everyone has the power to be creative. I believe that. Like, everyone is creative inside them, and I don't mean your ability to be able to translate your thoughts with a pencil. I mean your ability to think and output stuff that perhaps you wouldn't have been able to do, using a PC. I think encouraging us all to be more creative at work is really important. Creative workshops often are run very badly, and you get people in a room and you put a whiteboard up and you give them a pen and you say, right, come up with some ideas. And you freeze on the spot, right? And you've got to actually put effort into the process behind that. And I think teaching some basic principles about how to be creative is counterintuitive, but there is a process. We started this, someone asked me, think of a film. And I immediately went blank, couldn't think of any films, never seen any in my life. But that, that's your brain's response, right, when you're asked to be creative. So I think taking some time to actually learn how to create an environment in your office, and often it's not in the office, by the way. Leave the office, go somewhere else. There's a reason why offsites exist. It's because it does allow you to think differently. And encouraging that kind of shaking people out of their rivers of thinking.
Yeah.
Right, to get into a different river, it requires effort. It's a really simple thing, right? I bet you sit in the same seat. And if you have a regular meeting, do you sit in the same seat?
That's a good question.
Fight that urge, right?
Yeah.
It's that urge to sit in the same seat, to come in. You all sit in the same seats. You all say the same things. You all think in the same way. It's going to lead to the same outcomes, right? If you same input, same outcomes. Every time you go into one of those meetings, force yourself to sit somewhere differently.
It's my way of putting this, and this is just probably because I just like traveling, is I'm always more productive in airport lounges. I don't know what it is. It might be the combination of booze and the fact that I know I'm going to turn my laptop on and free Wi-Fi, yeah. But I tend to be able to get 2 hours work done in half an hour there, or a full day's work done in a couple of hours before a flight. So I think it's important to mix up where you are occasionally. But how do you bring AI into, how do we now take advantage of some of the technology as part of that?
So I think that one of the hardest parts of being creative and coming up with new ideas is starting. It's a bit like an exercise routine, right? Like, once you actually get into the habit, it becomes a lot easier. When you first sit in that room together, and even if you've done it right and you've gone somewhere off-site and it's somewhere creative and it's cool and you're relaxed and you've worn different clothes, starting the process is often the hardest thing. And you can either start it very scientifically with insight. Of course, we've already talked about how I think AI could be a great source of insight.
Or you can start with random crazy things, right? You bring in completely obtuse and totally tangential ideas in an effort to like shake yourself out of the thinking. And the more effective you are in your job and the better you are at what you do, the less likely you are, I think, in some respects, to be able to think of those crazy things. Well, what better than an AI tool to be able to help you to think of crazy things? If you go into ChatGPT and you ask it to solve a problem for you, it will come up with the most likely answers, right? That's exactly what an LLM does. It takes the average sum of all the knowledge and it gives you the most likely answers. Well, ask it to do the opposite. It can do that. Give me the least likely answers to this question.
So talking about I'm going to go back to my university days now. So my second degree, the first 3 weeks, they just spent it was called creativity and entrepreneurship, right? And I remember walking into that classroom the first time and they had incense burning on the side. They had like kids' toys over on like, it just makes me think of those days. I went from being, and I'm going to admit to this, a fairly, let's just say reading certain tabloid papers and being fairly set in my ways to being completely open-minded as a result of that.
Right.
And so I completely agree. But it's so counterintuitive when you think about the way that our businesses are run, which is we need to get to the end of a quarter and show an improvement on the previous quarter. Like everything is hustle, 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 run, run, run. Like to be able to tell people to stop and think laterally in a different direction.
And we breed a corporate environment in which it's impossible to think creatively, right? We design the place to be, even if you're in a very nice office, it's usually very sterile. It's usually very samey. It's very safe. Nothing crazy or different or weird is ever going to happen there. And you do get into a routine of thinking which stops you. I mean, if you're interested in science, there's lots of it. I don't understand it well enough. But it's a proven scientific fact. You get yourself into a groove. You get yourself into a river of thinking that becomes incredibly difficult to get out of. And that's why the incense and the weird rooms, it might feel weird, but it is actually effective.
I think the same is true for coming back to people and AI that we were talking about at the beginning for relationships.
Yeah.
So if I try and use an example, and it took me a while to train myself out of this. Like when you have a catch up with someone, you think, right, here's the agenda. We need to go through, the items, the projects that we are working on at the moment. We can talk about budgets.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I had to train myself to do was to spend the first 5-10 minutes just being like, we're not going to have an agenda because it's important that we understand and have a common language that we're talking from.
Yep.
But it sounds counterintuitive to basically say we've got to waste time to be more productive later.
Yeah.
And
again, one of the things that I think, AI isn't going to help us with is about that human connection in real life. And there's a lot of debate about whether remote work or in-person work is the right model. I think the truth is there's no one like model for all of society and all of work, right? You're going to have to blend it. But there are certain things for me which will always be better in person. And one-to-one catch-ups by their very nature are, I think, better in real life. AI is never going to be able to replace that. Now, it might be able to help you, so if you're a really busy manager and you've got lots of people and you're trying to catch up with them, AI might give you a really great summary of all the emails that they've sent you in the last month and all of the things that are hot topics for them, all of the meetings that they've been in, because it goes through a calendar.
Yeah.
And it gives you some nice, help me to understand what this person's been doing.
Yeah.
So you don't have to spend 20 minutes talking about it because I've got a summary of it already. You can concentrate then on the human part of it. Where I was going to go with this, though, is that AI can't replace, to your point about how to make those one-to-ones better. I find for sure when the weather's nice, the best one-to-ones are the ones where we walk around the office.
Yeah.
Outside. We go outside. You don't have the slightly intimidating eye contact. You can be much more honest. It's like being in the car, right? Do you ever think back to as a parent, the most honest your kids will ever be with you and the most information I ever get out of my kids is when we're in the car. Because it's not ever dinner. I'm not asking them the intense questions, right? It's a relaxed environment. It's noisy, but it's also different and it's physically put them out of their routine.
You're making me jump to another, thinking about kids and getting information out of them. I don't know what your kids are like, but when you ask them, how was your day? It's normally good, nice, it's okay, exactly. But the only way I've found, and I think there's a jump to AI using artificial intelligence here as well, is just to tell them nonsense stuff and get them to respond to it. So I heard a dinosaur came today, and they're like, no, it didn't. We did this. We're like, okay, so I found out what you did there.
That's nice.
And I think there's the same thing from what you were saying about getting AI to suggest different, the linear ways or the ways of not solving a problem.
Yeah.
I think there's a way that breaks you out of that cycle as well.
Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe in the power of coming up with new ideas. In business, I think it's really important to constantly come up with new ideas. Us in the channel, we're very stuck in our ways in some respects. People have been selling the same products to the same people for years and years and years and years. And then we're surprised when a really disruptive new technology comes along. So they're all desperate to jump down our throats and buy it from us. Like, what a strange outcome that is. And so I think it's really important that we're continually disruptive enough.
Yeah.
Not so disruptive that, the business stops working, but disruptive enough that new things are always possible. But that only comes when you put the effort in to be slightly disruptive. And we all have it in us. And I think it's, drummed in to us as a kid is you're either good at art or you're not. You're either creative or you're not. You're either a chemistry student or you're an art student. Chemistry students can't be creative.
Yeah. It was one of the biggest frustrations I had,
will be.
by the way, starting here, is we had a creative director who was, I'm going to say, very old school back at that time. Sorry, Matt, if you're listening to this series. And I was told, no, we're not creative because we haven't got it in our job title as a developer. And that was one of my frustrations, was everyone can be, if it's just a different type.
So I grew up, my sister's very creative. She's a brilliant artist, and we'll do lots of, and I was always very envious of her artistic ability. And so I put myself into the I'm not creative box. And for years I was like, nah, creative. I'm spreadsheets and whatever. And it's nonsense. And it's only much later in my life that I've realized I am creative in lots of ways and I really enjoy it. All human beings are creative. All of us. We all have creativity in us. Creativity isn't just painting and drawing. And I think in some, like, AI is a really cool expression of that. Like, the classic thing is you go on and you ask it to write you a poem, right? Mm-hmm. But that's fun and creative. And if you put words into it and then ask it to repeat it back to you in Jamaican patois or old school Chaucerian English, just that engagement with it, that's a creative process.
Well, you say that. Well, I'm going to break the fourth wall here, Harry, because I love bringing you on this. What's the phrase that you use, Harry, when you say we had AI? We wanted to...
Oh, yeah. We had AI, and I was told that this bad boy is going to do all the drudgery, and then we'll be painting and writing poetry. And then we get it, and we ask it to make pictures and write poems, whilst I still send all the email.
Yeah. But you know what that is? That's all the clever tech people who desperately wish they could be creative, have been told they can't be creative, and have gone out and created a set of tools for themselves or for the world that allow them to be on a level playing field of creativity with those that are truly creative within.
Well, maybe it was at the vengeance, and they've sought to smite the creatives from the world.
This is the optimism and pragmatism divide here, but everyone's creative. Everyone's creative. I've loved using Midjourney, so I'm really into photography. Mm-hmm. That was how probably one of the first things I did to prove to myself that I can be creative. Photography's creative endeavor. It's fun. You can take photos of. But I've also really loved using Midjourney to create images, create photographs, basically. Mm-hmm. You don't need any real skills to do that other than being able to put words in. For me, that's two halves of the same thing.
But I think it helps you be better at describing what you're looking for as well, because you can say, especially if you know about photography, like, I want this depth of field, I want this type of background. Like, it helps you understand how you might compose a picture.
I think, there's a lot of talk early on in the AI world that prompt engineering would be this, fancy job. And of course, that's nonsense because the model evolved quickly enough that you would be able to use natural language. So I think, yes, to a point. Like, it's nice to know what depth of field is and how to apply it to get a certain look out of a photograph, out of the picture in Midjourney. I actually think that the greatest skill that you can have with that is being able to articulate with words what you see in your head. Mm-hmm. Because if you can give a truly...
So we should become better communicators, is what you're saying.
Right. Like, our ability to actually articulate the thoughts that we have. And part of it is about having a big enough vocabulary to do it. Part of it's also practicing, articulating what's in your head and trying to get it out. And I think if you're a creative person, you've done that probably with pictures or with words, right? And if you can write a story, your ability to be able to take what's inside your head and put it on a page has got a good connection there. In business, a lot of the time, maybe that's in numbers, but maybe we've kind of shut ourselves off a little bit from that ability to take truly what's inside us and put it outside. And actually interacting with AI forces you to take what's from inside you and to express it. And maybe then it ends up as a different output. So your words end up as pictures or as a song or whatever, but you still have to be able to articulate your feelings and your desires into the machine.
I think, but by that lens, I think we will be better. It should make us better communicators. I have a slightly different view on the prompt engineering side of things, which is, because there's this very negative view that AI is coming for all of our jobs. As usual, we're still seeing rounds of layoffs as a result of, not just a result of AI, but a result of the current market. I actually think in the future we're going to need more smart people in order to know how to get the most out of it, which, to your point, might not be prompt engineers. They might just be better communicators.
Also, storytelling isn't going away, right? Storytelling, whether it's in business or I'm not a marketeer, so forgive me, but storytelling feels like the central proposition of what marketing actually really is, right? You tell a story on behalf of a brand.
I hear the groan of hundreds of marketers. The cheer or groan of
more than that.
Yeah.
I don't think that ability to tell a story is really important. And for me, the exciting part is it's going to be more important in real life. Like public speaking or one-on-one speaking is a skill that's going to become more important, not less important, because it's going to be one of the only places left that, at least for a long time until we get the fancy, contact lenses and earbuds that are feeding us the words to. Until that happens, and that's a long way away, our ability to express our emotions and our feelings and our, what's inside us and impress that upon one or many people, that's going to be really important.
And I think as part of that, you need to make sure you include the empathy element. Like, are you building an emotional connection? Are you understanding someone's feelings and how they might react to, which AI can approximate but can't build that story and connection.
It can fake it, and I think it will get to the point where it can fake it so convincingly you won't know the difference. Like, it can already create images that we can barely tell apart, videos not far away, voice agents are also not far away. It's not going to be long until it's impossible to tell the difference between a real human and an AI agent. But an AI agent can never truly understand another human being. And so by definition, the one thing that will always separate us is our humanity. And that's very deep and very philosophical, but it does mean that in a world where, we're going to be surrounded by these things, they're sitting in a room with another human being. You're the only other type of being that can truly understand even experience and how I feel. And you showing me that you're empathetic to how I feel is going to be really important. That said, I mean, there's already AI, just to play the other side of that, there's already AI therapists that apparently get much better scores and much better feedback than real life therapists.
That's kind of scary, actually, now I think about it. I'm not quite sure.
Imagine that empathy would be like a central tenet of that sort of interaction, but
maybe it is formulaic, coming back to it. Maybe therapy is, but connections are. So we've talked about storytelling. I think that's one of the key things as a piece of advice would give anyone looking at the future roadmap for their business and how they're bringing some of this technology in. What would be, let's try and end on 3 points. Like, we've got storytelling as one. What are some of the other elements that stood out for you?
So it has to be like critical thinking, right? The ability to think critically and laterally about a problem and to really question it.
I'm going to be,
and the fundamental tenet, I think that's going to be.
I'm going to be pointy on this one, and it's like I try and bring even to this podcast, right? It's no fun listening to two people agree with each other, right? You have to have some disagreement, and I almost think I'm not saying you should go into every business meeting disagreeing with the person next to you,
right?
But I think you're exactly right. You need to have the ability to critically think about something, apply it, understand where the gaps may be. Otherwise, you're not going to create anything that's different from today.
So you've got to build a team around you that's different to you. And the worst mistake you can make as a leader is to recruit people who look, sound, behave.
Says this is
sound like each other and come from the same university. It's a dreadful plurality of thought. Is really important if you want to come to a good outcome that isn't just the same as everyone else.
Which is scary when you consider the direction of travel with DEI today, right?
Well, it's all built off the same data set. And so you can imagine them all coming to the same conclusions, which is why, in that world, building a team of diverse people who think and behave differently to each other, and the skill of a leader is to blend that into a harmonious, disagree in private, commit in public kind of approach. But that's going to be an absolutely fundamental skill.
Yeah.
to build those sorts of teams and to be able to take them.
I think I had a stat that it's something like 30 teams with a diverse set of thought can make decisions on average 30% better than those that are.
I don't doubt it. And of course, the issue is if you bring people in who are totally off different pages, you can never make any decisions. I think the key thing is like you can have very different experience and a very different path to where you got to. If you share the same values and you have the same beliefs about what good looks like, then that difference in experience is kind of filtered through that the value lens. It ends up with a good outcome, a blend of different experiences into a single harmonious.
And that's the challenge.
The sausage maker.
So that's what we need to bring as leaders to that space, which is how do we blend those together into the.
You got to go find good people who think differently to you, and help bring them into that world.
And so complete. I said we need to disagree, and I agree with that point. So what's the third one that we've come out with from today?
So we've done the building good teams, I think critical thinking, and then the last one really is about empathy and actually caring about other humans. Empathy's the term we use to actually describe lots of different things. Empathy is that I can feel what you feel. It's actually not the core skill. It's caring about how you feel and at least showing. You can pretend to be empathetic actually. And just the same, you can pretend to be confident, right? It's exactly the same thing to the other person.
Yeah.
As long as you show that you acknowledge the feelings and you show that you care and actually then do something about it.
It's like training active listening or those kind of techniques.
You can teach yourself to be more empathetic or at least to behave more empathetically. But we've got to really focus on that. I think far too much businesses, talking again with people that don't actually deliver on it. And again, in a world where all knowledge is available immediately, decision making is going to be super sharp. We've really got to double down on caring about the people that we work with.
And I think that comes into B2B sales, talking about the challenger set. And again, like the latest research is showing the biggest gap we have is buyer confidence. Like they're not confident in making a decision about a particular product, especially when they've got to sign something off that could be 7 figures. Yeah. And so coming right back to some of the themes that you put in there, like not knowing how your solution fits or solves their problem, not going in with something new that helps them understand the challenge they may have.
Yeah. And not caring enough in that instance. So like if I come in and I'm just trying to sell you a thing, maybe even I pitched it exactly right, I've matched it all, I've done the research, I've pitched it right. You know that it's the right thing to do, but you're scared. Me acknowledging that fear as a seller and not just trying to ram it down your throat, but say, look, I know this is difficult. I'm also scared. If I don't do this and we don't match this up, like there's a whole load of issues for me as well. Like overcoming that together as a pair of humans rather than a pair of chatbots. You've really got to work on that stuff.
Which I think you can also only build through, in some ways, face-to-face relationships, or at least understanding each other as humans.
You've got to put the effort in.
Yeah.
It doesn't come for free, and it doesn't come... it's not about being personable even. It's about actually caring about the other person's motivations. Like, if you do, negotiation training, you often talk to get inside the head of the other person. But that really just does mean making the effort to understand them as a human, not just their... Don't just understand their spreadsheet, really got to understand them.
Completely agree. Adam, it's been a pleasure having you on the Tech Marketing Podcast today. Even though we've talked a lot about sales, very little about marketing. This is
always going to hear you that way.
Yeah, but it's been a pleasure having you back on today, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Simon.